never thought I'd see my own handwriting tremble back to me after all these years. The envelope was yellowed, its edges curling like tired petals. My name, Margaret Ellison, was written in a slanted hand I hadn't seen in decades. My hand, the younger version of me, the woman who still believed in promises, in eternal love, in forever. I found it just yesterday, while cleaning out the attic. The old wooden chest had been sitting there since my husband died 20 years ago. Dust had claimed it like a grave, but when I opened it, I could still smell lavender oil and faint cigarette smoke from his shirts. And there, tucked between an old photo album and a dried rose, was this letter, addressed to me, from me. Postmarked the 12th of June, 1995. I sat down on the attic floor, the wood cold under my knees, and stared at it for a long time. The ink had bled a little, but the handwriting was unmistakable. Mine, before arthritis twisted my fingers. Mine, before the world did. My heart pounded like I was holding a secret I wasn't ready to read. I almost laughed at myself, an old woman, afraid of her own words. But something in me whispered that this wasn't just a memory. It was a message, and it waited 30 years to find me again. When I finally broke the seal, the paper crackled like a voice waking from sleep. "Dear Margaret," it began, "if you are reading this, you must be at an age where truth no longer frightens you. I am writing this to remind you of something you will forget, something you must remember before it's too late." I froze. The ink swirled before my eyes. What truth? What could I possibly forget? You will be tempted to believe the story everyone tells you. But don't. Not all funerals are for the dead, Margaret. Some are for the living who buried what they shouldn't have. My stomach twisted. I felt an ache crawl up my chest, the same ache that came every time I thought of Daniel. Daniel, my husband, my first love, my last regret. He died in 2005, a quiet heart attack in his sleep, or so they told me. I never saw his body. He was too damaged for an open casket, they said. I believed them. I was broken, grieving, barely standing, but suddenly, holding this letter, I felt that grief stir again, different this time. Not sorrow, doubt. "Look in the garden," the next line said. "Under the oak. You promised me you'd never forget, but I know you will. So when you read this, go there. Dig where the roots fork like veins." I dropped the paper. My hands shook uncontrollably. The oak tree still stood in the backyard, tall and quiet, guarding the fence line. I planted it with Daniel the summer after we married, 1974. We buried a time capsule there once, little trinkets, a locket, a photograph. Could that be what I meant? But why the secrecy? Why the warning? The attic suddenly felt smaller, airless. I stuffed the letter back in its envelope and went downstairs. The house creaked like it was listening. I could almost hear Daniel's voice again, that gentle hum as he worked on his typewriter. He always left notes, small, poetic things. He'd write, "Margaret, never forget to water what loves you back." I'd tape them to the mirror and smile. That night, I couldn't sleep. The letter burned in my mind, the words echoing again and again. Not all funerals are for the dead. Dig under the oak. By sunrise, I couldn't take it anymore. I wrapped a shawl around my shoulders, took the old rusted shovel from the shed, and walked into the yard. The winter air bit my cheeks, and the earth smelled damp and ancient. The oak stood silent, as if waiting. Every thrust of the shovel sent a jolt up my arms. My breath came in sharp white puffs. I dug until the soil changed color, darker, richer, and the shovel hit something hard. My heart stuttered. I dropped to my knees and clawed at the dirt with my bare hands. It wasn't the time capsule. It was a box, an old metal box, rusted at the corners but still locked tight. My name was scratched faintly on the lid, Margaret. The lock was small, the kind used for diaries, and though it resisted, it gave in with a soft click when I pried it with the shovel's edge. Inside, wrapped in a plastic bag, were 3 things: a photograph, a key, and another letter. The photograph made me gasp. It was of Daniel alive, smiling, arm around a woman I didn't recognize. Her face was half-turned, but something about her posture, intimate, familiar, made my throat tighten. On the back, in Daniel's handwriting, were the words, "For M.E., when you finally understand, M.E." Those were my initials. But was that message to me or from her? The key was small, brass, with an old-fashioned tag tied around it that said, "Locker 214. Locker? Where? And then the second letter. Not from my younger self this time. This one was in Daniel's handwriting. If you ever find this, it means I couldn't tell you the truth when I should have. But the truth will find you, Margaret. It always does. Forgive me. Forgive him for what? I sat there, dirt caked under my nails, wind tangling my hair, staring at the man I thought I'd known all my life. 30 years of silence. And now he was speaking from the ground. I looked up at the house, the kitchen window, the curtain still yellowed from time. Every memory of us flashed through my mind, our wedding, our fights, the night he came home smelling of whiskey and someone else's perfume. I'd buried that suspicion, just like this box, convincing myself it was nothing. But now I wasn't so sure. The letter from my younger self had warned me, and Daniel's letter confirmed it. Something had been buried not just under that tree, but in my life, and after 30 years, it was clawing its way back up. For a long moment, I couldn't move. My body locked in place, every nerve screaming at me to run, but I just stared. Those fingers weren't my imagination. They were real, gripping the wooden edge of the attic hatch like something out of a nightmare. My breath caught in my throat as the boards above groaned under shifting weight. "Who's there?" I whispered, but the voice that came out wasn't mine. It was small, broken, trembling. The fingers vanished. A soft thud followed, then silence. The kind of silence that presses against your ears and makes you question if you really heard anything at all. I stayed frozen, clutching the flashlight so tightly my knuckles turned white. Minutes passed. Nothing. Finally, I forced myself to move. I pulled the stepladder from the hallway closet, dragging it beneath the hatch. My heart felt like it would break through my ribs. I reached up, grabbed the cord, and pulled. The hatch creaked open, releasing a faint puff of dust that smelled of old wood and time. I aimed the flashlight upward. The beam cut through the darkness, revealing nothing but cobwebs, a few boxes, and Arthur's old trunk in the corner. But I could feel it. Someone or something was up there, watching, waiting. "Come down," I said, louder now. "I know you're there." No answer. I hesitated, then climbed halfway up the ladder. The wooden steps creaked beneath me. I pushed my trembling hand through the opening and flicked the flashlight toward the far end of the attic. Something moved. A quick, jerking shadow too fast to focus on. My chest seized with panic. I nearly lost my balance, but I caught the edge and steadied myself, squinting into the beam. That's when I saw it. A pile of blankets shoved behind the trunk, a half-empty jar of peanut butter, and next to it a child's shoe, small, mud-stained, out of place. I gasped. My mind couldn't make sense of it. A child? Here? The attic groaned again. I whipped the light toward the sound and caught a glimpse of a face. Just for a second. Wide eyes, pale skin, hair tangled and dirty. Then it vanished into the shadows. I screamed. The flashlight slipped from my hand and hit the floor below, shattering the bulb. I stumbled backward, falling off the ladder and landing hard on the carpet. Pain shot up my leg, but I didn't care. I crawled toward the phone. My hands shook so badly I could barely dial. Ellen answered after the third ring. "Mom, what's wrong now?" she sighed. "There's someone in the attic," I panted. "A child, please, Ellen, call the police." Her voice softened, like she was talking to a frightened animal. "Mom, we've talked about this. There's no one there. You're scaring yourself again. Please try to calm down." "Ellen, I saw him," I shouted. "He's real. A little boy. He's been living up there." "Mom," there was a pause. "You're not making sense. I'll come over tomorrow morning, okay? Try to get some sleep." The line went dead. I sat there, shaking, the silence pressing down again. My eyes darted toward the ceiling. Nothing moved now. The house felt still, too still. When I finally gathered the courage to move, I locked the attic hatch with the old broom handle wedged underneath. Then I sat in the kitchen, watching the clock tick past 3, then 4. At sunrise, I made myself tea, my hands still trembling so much that I spilled half of it. I replayed it over and over in my head. The fingers, the face, the shoe. None of it made sense. Why would a child hide up there? And how long had he been there? Days? Weeks? Maybe longer? I thought of the missing food, the footsteps, the humming. Could he have been copying Arthur's tune, or did he somehow know it? When Ellen arrived the next morning, she found me sitting by the front door with my coat on and my camera in my lap. "You look awful," she said, placing a bag of groceries on the counter. "Did you even sleep?" "I told you," I said, my voice hoarse. "There's someone up there, a boy." She sighed, rubbing her temples. "Mom, please, you're working yourself up again. Let me check so you'll calm down, okay?" Before I could stop her, she pulled the ladder out and climbed up, pushing the hatch open. I gripped her arm. "Ellen, be careful." She flashed her phone light around. "See? Empty. Just boxes and dust. Nothing else." I stared up at her, confused. But there was a blanket, food, a shoe. "There's nothing here, Mom," she said. Climbing down. Maybe you were dreaming. Or maybe someone left something years ago. You need rest. She patted my hand, gave me one of those tired smiles, and went to unpack the groceries. But when she wasn't looking, I slipped upstairs. My leg still ached from the fall, but I had to see for myself. I pushed open the hatch again. The air that drifted down was cold, metallic. I climbed halfway up, holding the edge of the frame. Ellen was right, the corner was empty. The blanket and jar were gone. No shoe. Nothing. But as I shone my flashlight along the rafters, I noticed something I hadn't before, scratches on the wood. Dozens of them, carved into the beam. Letters, shaky and uneven. I squinted, tracing them with my finger. Help me. My stomach turned. I stumbled back, nearly falling again, and slammed the hatch shut. That night, I barely slept. Every creak felt louder, every shadow darker. Around midnight, I heard soft tapping 3 times, faint but deliberate. Then silence. Then 3 taps again. I turned on the light, heart pounding. "What do you want?" I whispered. No answer, just another soft tap, like knuckles on wood. I couldn't take it anymore. I got up, grabbed my camera, and hit record. "If you're real," I whispered, staring into the lens, "I'll find you. I'll prove to them I'm not crazy." And as I turned the camera toward the ceiling, a quiet voice drifted down, barely a whisper, but I heard it clear as day. I didn't mean to hurt her. My blood ran cold. "Who?" I whispered. Silence. Then the sound of light footsteps retreating across the attic floor, fading into the distance. That's when I realized it wasn't just some stranger's child up there. Whoever he was, he knew something. Something about a her. And suddenly, I couldn't help but remember my neighbor, Mrs. Langley, the sweet old woman from 2 houses down who'd gone missing 3 months ago. Everyone thought she'd wandered off, confused. But now, I wasn't so sure. The key was warm in my pocket by the time I decided where it belonged. I didn't sleep after the digging. I just sat at the kitchen table with that little brass thing between my fingers, rubbing the tag raw until the paper curled. Locker 214. There were lockers once at the old Union Station before they shut them down after some scare. If anything of ours survived the city's habit of cleaning away its ghosts, it would be there, in the belly of that soot-stained building where Daniel and I used to drink bad coffee and watch trains shoulder through the fog. I dressed slowly, talking to myself the way old women do when the rooms are too quiet. Cardigan, scarf, the black shoes with the good grip. I tucked the letter from my younger self into my handbag and slid Daniel's photograph into the pocket of my coat. He looked so alive in that picture, laugh lines, that infuriatingly gentle grin, and next to him the woman with the half-turned face, like a secret mid-whisper. I tried to enlarge her in my mind. A slope of jaw, a sweep of hair, a familiarity I couldn't quite catch. The cab smelled like peppermint and engine oil. "Union Station?" the driver asked. I nodded. The streets wore the kind of morning light that forgives everything. I watched the shopkeepers fiddle with keys, watched a girl tug a stubborn dog along the curb, watched the city do what it always does, Pretend that nothing underneath has ever shifted. The station hadn't changed much, only grown quieter. Like me, the big clock hung over the concourse, hands forever speaking of arrivals and departures, and the benches still had the polish of 1,000 restless coats. I felt small in that giant room, as if I'd wandered into a cathedral built for someone else's god. At the far end was a narrow corridor with a flickering light. A sign over a glass window said, "Property and storage." Inside sat a young woman with a braid as thick as rope, reading a paperback. She looked up at my reflection in the glass before she looked at me, the polite way people look at the elderly, gauging whether I'm lost. "Good morning," I said, careful with my voice so it wouldn't shake. "I'm looking for the old lockers. I have a key." Her eyebrows lifted. "They shut those down a long time ago, ma'am. But some of the old units were moved downstairs. What number?" 214. She whistled softly. "That's one of the relics." She stood, slid her book under the counter, and reached for a ring of keys that could have anchored a boat. "Come on, we'll see if your ghost still fits." We took the elevator that groaned like it had stories of its own, deep into a basement that smelled of wet concrete and metal. When the doors opened, a corridor of lockers yawned to our left, 100 small doors the color of old bruises. Each had a number stenciled on in white paint. I held the brass key tighter. My heart tapped at my ribs like it was asking to be let out. "Down there," she said, pointing. "If it turns, it's yours. If it doesn't, well, sometimes the past insists on staying shut." It turned. At first, not at all. I had to wiggle it with the stubbornness that living alone teaches you. Then there was a quiet surrender, a click that echoed in the empty hall, and the locker door creaked open, grudging as a confession. Inside was a square parcel wrapped in brown paper and tied with twine. "For goodness sake," the young woman breathed. "How long has that been in there?" 30 years, I whispered. I didn't realize I had tears until one fell onto my wrist like something remembering its gravity. "Do you want me to?" "No," I said too quickly. My voice softened. "Thank you. I can manage." She stood back, giving me privacy. The paper was dry and brittle, and when I untied the knot, Daniel's knot, he had a way of looping string that felt like a signature. The twine fell like a shedskin. I peeled the paper away, and for a heartbeat I thought it was empty. A cruel joke. But there, snug inside, was an old shoebox, the kind with a felt lining, scuffed at the corners. Inside the box were 4 things: an audio cassette wrapped in tissue, a manila envelope thick with documents, a Polaroid tucked into a folded napkin, and a smaller key on a ring without a tag. My fingers went first to the tape. Someone Daniel had written across its edge in careful block letters, "Julie 7, 1995. Do not play until you're ready." I closed my hand around it, feeling the tiny screws like braille. Ready for what? The absurdity hit me, then left just as quickly. I could hear Daniel's laugh. "Margaret, you could never leave a wrapped gift alone. You always had to peek." I slid the cassette back into its tissue and picked up the Polaroid. A newborn, red-faced and scrunched, a small fist held up like an accusation. On its wrist, a white hospital bracelet. The photo had that washed-out instant film color, the kind that makes everything look both immediate and impossibly old. Someone had written on the border, "For M.E. she has your stubborn mouth." M.E. I had always taken those initials to mean me, Margaret Ellison, but with the photo in my hand, the letters shivered, loose, like they might belong to someone else. For M.E. It could have been a person, a place, a code. My stomach flipped. "Everything okay?" the young woman asked from the doorway. "Yes," I said. "Too quickly. Thank you. I have what I need." Back upstairs, she made me sign a ledger that looked older than both of us and rang me up for some archival fee that sounded invented. I didn't mind. I needed a receipt for the world I had just bought back into my life. I didn't open the envelope until I was home. The house seemed to draw itself tighter as I walked in, as if it knew it was about to remember something it had promised to forget. I set the box on the dining table and closed the curtains, shutting out the neighbors' eyes. The clock in the hall ticked with that soft judge's patience. Inside the manila envelope were documents, brittle and official. A hospital discharge record from Street Helena's, dated the 8th of July, 1995. Mother, Lila Hart. Father, unknown. Attached, a consent form with a signature that made my scalp prickle. It was Daniel's, not his full signature, but the ghost of it, the way he angled the D, the pause before the last stroke. He hadn't signed as a parent, he'd signed as a witness. A second paper, a deed transfer draft, listing an address I knew too well, the small gray house on Harper Street we sold in 2004, the year after his heart attack. The draft was never filed. On the margin, in Daniel's hand, for M only, if I can't, there was more. A bank booklet for a Harbor Federal Safe Deposit Box branch, 3 box, Hashonenine. And there it was, the twin to my little tagless key, a smaller, newer brass with a triangular head and teeth like a delicate jaw. It glinted in my palm. I didn't realize I was holding my breath until the phone rang. It rang the old-fashioned way, the way that makes fear jump before any thought can. I stared at it. The caller ID was blank, a private number, as if the past had learned to block itself. I let it ring 4 times, 5. On the 6th, I picked up, "Hello." Static, soft as a dress being lifted from a hook. Then a voice I almost recognized but didn't, smoke-blurred, low. "You found it." The words snagged in my throat. "Who is this?" Silence. Then, "Don't play the tape alone." The line clicked dead. The air around me thinned. I set the receiver back in its cradle and listened to the false quiet of the house, a hush that doesn't mean nothing's there, only that something is listening. I went to the front window and lifted the curtain. The street was normal. A boy on a bicycle, a woman tugging a toddler along, the mail truck lumbering past like an animal in a zoo. I could have called someone, my daughter, but she stopped accepting my calls after I told her I planned to sell the house last year. Or my sister, no. Ruth and I hadn't spoken in a decade, ever since she said I had romanticized a liar, and I said she'd grown addicted to bitterness. We were both right, I suppose. There were neighbors I could summon with a pie and a note, but I didn't want neighborhood eyes on this. This was mine, Daniel's, that young woman's. The newborn with the bracelet, the voice that knew what I'd found. I took the cassette to the old living room where the stereo still sat, a yawning black mouth that had not been fed in years. My fingers remembered its buttons like a dance you learn once and never forget. Eject, seat the tape, close, rewind, breathe. I stood with a hand on the console, debating whether to wait for daylight, for courage, for company. The words on the tape jacket, "Do not play until you're ready," looked like a dare and a mercy. Not all funerals are for the dead, my younger self had warned. A sudden draft brushed my ankles. I turned. The back door to the yard was still locked, but one of the kitchen windows was lifted an inch. I remember shutting it. I am certain I did. The gulls that wander inland sometimes cry in the afternoons, and I close the windows to hush them. I don't forget that sort of thing. I am old, but I am not careless. I slid the window down and latched it, feeling something more sensible than fear. Anger. 30 years. 30 years of telling myself a story made of absence and invented answers. 30 years of protecting a man's memory because that's what good wives do when the world tells them the man is gone and the story is finished. I pressed play. At first, silence. A small hiss. A clatter, like a chair leg dragging. Then Daniel's voice filled the room, thinner than I remembered, but unmistakable, the way a song is unmistakable, even when played on a stranger's radio. "Margaret," he said, "if you are listening, I could not put this in your hands while mine were still warm. Forgive that. There are debts in every love story. Mine was cowardice." Something moved outside on the porch, a soft shadow crossing the frosted glass. I paused the tape. Everything in me throttled between the present room and the past, calling my name. The shadow hesitated, then withdrew. Footsteps on wood, then gone. I pressed play again, and Daniel's voice returned, a river I had dammed with grief springing through the cracks. "This will sound impossible," he said, "but not all funerals are for the dead, my love. Some are rehearsals." I gripped the console until my knuckles whitened. The tape clicked on, steady as a heartbeat, and I was never good at dying on cue. The room fell silent after that last line, as if even the air didn't know how to move. I was never good at dying on cue. I froze, my hands trembling against the stereo. Daniel's voice crackled faintly through the tape, soft static between words like a heartbeat struggling to continue. He was supposed to be dead. I buried him. I mourned him. I lived with that grief every single day. My pulse raced. I pressed play again. "Margaret," his voice continued, lower now, almost a whisper. "When you hear this, I'll be far from where you think I am. I didn't die that night. They only needed you to believe I did, for your safety and hers." I stepped back as if struck. "Hers? By the time you read my letter and dig up what I hid, you'll be ready to understand. They called it an accident, a heart attack. But it was a lie I agreed to. I had to disappear before they came for you next." I felt my chest tighten. The room swayed slightly, and I grabbed the chair behind me for balance. The shadows in the corners seemed to breathe. The tape hissed. Then Daniel sighed, an old familiar sound that made my throat ache. I loved you, Margaret, more than I ever loved the life I built. But I did something I could never undo, something that had consequences. When I met her, it wasn't an affair, not in the way people whisper it. It was a mistake born out of fear, out of wanting to protect what little I could. She worked for them. She was supposed to get close to me, and she did. Too close. Her name was Lila Hart. Lila Hart, the name from the hospital document, the mother on the birth record. I felt cold seep into my bones. Daniel's voice went on. When she told me she was pregnant, I panicked. I knew what that meant, what they'd do to her, to the child, to you if they ever connected the dots. So I arranged for a death. My own. I let them believe I was gone, and I left everything behind. But I couldn't let them raise that child. She had my blood. Our blood. I hit pause. The room tilted. Our blood. My knees weakened, and I sat hard on the couch. No, no, I whispered. That can't be what he means. I pressed play again, almost afraid of the next truth. I gave her to someone I trusted. Someone who would never tell you because they feared you'd go looking. You probably hated her for it. You probably don't speak anymore. But Ruth, she saved that baby. The air punched out of me. My sister's name? Ruth. My sister Ruth, the one who vanished for a year in 1996 and came back changed, colder, distant. She said she'd been volunteering at a clinic in another state, but she never talked about it, never explained the letters that came for her in plain brown envelopes, never told me why she stopped visiting after Daniel's death. The tape clicked softly as Daniel's voice wavered, weary. If you're listening, Margaret, the child is grown now. She doesn't know who you are. She doesn't even know who I was, but she's been watching you, protecting you, in her own way. You've already met her. You just didn't realize. I covered my mouth, the voice on the phone, the young woman at the station, her braid, her steady eyes. She found it. She had known my name before I said it. My heart pounded so hard, I thought it might break through my ribs. The tape sputtered again. You'll have questions, Daniel said, but answers come with danger. Don't trust anyone who asks about locker 214. Don't tell anyone about the safe deposit key. If you want the full truth, go to Harbor Federal Box 19. Everything I couldn't say is in there. And if you see Ruth, tell her I kept my promise. I stayed dead until it was safe. Then silence, just the faint static and the distant hum of the tape spinning to its end. I sat there for a long time, listening to the soft click as the reel stopped. The house creaked, the clock ticked, and the shadows of the oak tree stretched across the curtains like long fingers reaching for me. My husband was alive when I buried him. My sister had raised his child. And someone I'd just met, a stranger, was somehow part of this tangled story. I pressed my palm over my heart. "You coward!" I whispered into the empty room. "You left me to mourn a ghost." But beneath the anger was something worse, hope, the dangerous kind that only the old understand, because it makes you feel young again. I needed to find Ruth, The last number I had for her was buried in an old address book by the phone. I flipped through pages filled with fading names of people already gone, neighbors, cousins, long-dead friends, until I found hers, Ruth Ellison, 972804XXXX. I dialed it with shaking hands. 3 rings. 4. Then a voice, not hers, a man. "Hello? Is Ruth there?" I asked. A pause. "Who's asking?" "Her sister." Another pause, longer. "I'm sorry, ma'am. Ruth passed away 2 years ago." My heart stopped. "No," I whispered. "That can't. She left a note for you, actually. Said if anyone named Margaret ever called, I should give her this address." He recited it slowly. "Crescent Pines Rest Home, room 14B. My throat tightened. "She left something?" "I don't know what," just said. "She'll understand when she's ready." The same words, the same phrase Daniel used. "When you're ready." I thanked him and hung up, my mind spiraling. Ruth was gone, but even in death, she'd left a trail. I didn't wait. I grabbed my coat, my purse, the small brass key, and stepped out into the fading light. The sky was bruised with dusk, the wind sharp enough to sting. My heart felt too loud in the quiet street. The drive to Crescent Pines was long, an hour of empty roads, and my own thoughts unraveling. By the time I arrived, the sun had dropped completely, and the building stood against the night like a pale skeleton. Inside, the nurse at the front desk looked up. "Can I help you?" "I'm looking for Ruth Ellison's room," I said. Her expression softened with recognition. "Oh, Miss Ellison. Yes, we remember her. Room 14B. She passed peacefully. But wait." She reached into a drawer and pulled out a small brown envelope. "She left this for you. Said to hand it over only if you came in person." My fingers trembled as I took it. "Thank you." I stepped outside into the parking lot before opening it. The moonlight caught the corner of the envelope, and I saw her handwriting, familiar and jagged, like mine when I'm upset. Inside was a short note and a photograph. The note read, "Maggie, if you're reading this, then you finally listened to him. I wanted to tell you the truth, but I swore I'd protect her. Her name is Evelyn. She's 29 now. Works at Union Station. She has your eyes. Be careful who's still looking for her. Some things Daniel never escaped." And then one last line, smeared as if written through tears. "He didn't fake his death to run from you, Maggie. He did it to save his daughter from them." I looked at the photograph. It was the young woman from the station, the braid, the steady eyes, the gentle way she'd said, "Come on, we'll see if your ghost still fits." Evelyn, my granddaughter, the child I never knew existed. The blood drained from my face as realization hit, the phone call. The voice warning me not to play the tape alone. She was trying to protect me. But from who? Behind me, across the parking lot, a car engine rumbled softly. Headlights flickered on for a moment, then off again. I turned, clutching Ruth's note to my chest. Something told me this wasn't over. Not yet. The car idled a moment longer before sliding away into the dark, its taillights dissolving in mist. I stood still until the sound was gone, the paper in my hands trembling like it still contained heat from Ruth's body. "Evelyn!" I whispered the name aloud, tasting its shape. It felt both foreign and familiar, like a song I must have hummed before ever learning the words. I didn't go home right away. The road between the rest home and the city curved through an old industrial strip, half-empty warehouses, and cold street lamps that blinked like they couldn't quite stay awake. I stopped at a gas station, fed a few coins into the payphone habit, paranoia, and dialed information for Union Station. When the clerk answered, I asked if an Evelyn Hart still worked in the property and storage department. "Yes, ma'am," the voice said. "Evening shift. She's here now." I hung up before I could change my mind. The drive back took 20 minutes, but the minutes stretched like wire. Every time a car followed too close, I checked the mirror twice. The letter from Ruth sat on the passenger seat, its edges fluttering in the draft, whispering, "Be careful who's still looking for her." Union Station at night was a different creature. The commuters were gone. Only echoes lived there. Pigeons roosted in the rafters. Cleaning carts squeaked between benches. I walked the long concourse until I saw her behind the counter. The braid loosened now, a strand of hair falling against her cheek. She looked up when she heard my steps, and for a moment her expression was unreadable. Then a flicker recognition, perhaps, or guilt. "You came back," she said softly. I found Ruth's note, her hands stilled on the counter. "Then you know." "I know enough to be afraid," I said. "Tell me the rest." She looked around empty hall, camera high in the corner. She stepped out from behind the counter. "Not here. Follow me." We walked down the same corridor where she'd led me before, but instead of the basement door she turned toward a maintenance stairwell. The air smelled of dust and metal. She pushed through a service exit into a narrow courtyard where the moonlight pooled in a square of cracked concrete. "Why now?" I asked. "Why find me after all these years?" "Because they found him." Her voice was sharp suddenly, the way fear is when it pretends to be strength. "Daniel?" She nodded. "I was told he died again 3 months ago. But his name showed up on a shipping manifest out of Baltimore, under an alias he used in the records D. Hale, the same alias on the safe deposit box. The brass key in my purse seemed to burn against the fabric. "You've been watching me." "Yes," she said. "Ruth asked me to. She said they'd come for you if they thought you knew where he was. You were never supposed to find the letter in the garden." "Then why write it?" I demanded. "Why lead me here?" "Because he believed secrets rot slower underground." She looked at me then, really looked. "He wanted you to remember when it was safe. Maybe he thought this was safe." I almost laughed. "Does any of this look safe to you?" For the first time she smiled a small, broken smile that made her look younger. "No." I sank onto the cold step. The ache in my knees flared, but I ignored it. "He said on the tape he did it to protect us. From them." "Who are they?" Evelyn crouched beside me. "Government? Private? Maybe both. He was a journalist before you met him, right?" "Yes, foreign desk. He quit after a trip went wrong." "He didn't quit," she said. "He was forced out. He found something, documents, names. He kept copies." Lila was planted to retrieve them. When she told him she was pregnant, it complicated everything. He staged his death to disappear before they could use her or you as leverage. He left evidence in pieces: the box, the tape, the key. I've spent 5 years trying to find the rest. The night hummed with the distant whistle of a train. I saw the birth record, I said quietly. You were listed as Lila's daughter. She died when I was 2, Evelyn said. Car crash. Or that's what the file said? But the photos you found, those were from the same week Daniel vanished. He kept one of her with me. Ruth raised me after that. She never told me who I really was until last year, when she got sick. She said, "You'll know her by the way she says your name." I didn't realize I was crying until she reached out, tentative to wipe my cheek. "I don't even know how to be angry," I whispered. "He lied. Ruth lied. And somehow you've been guarding me like a stranger, protecting an old secret." "I thought meeting you might make sense of him," she said. "But all it did was make me wish I'd known you sooner." A sharp clatter interrupted us, metal against stone. We both turned. A trash can had toppled near the gate. Wind or something worse. Evelyn grabbed my arm. "We need to go." Back inside the stairwell, she pulled a small phone from her pocket, thumb flying across the screen. "We can't use my apartment. Too traceable. There's a diner 2 blocks from here, all-night place. They keep their blinds closed. We'll talk there." I nodded, letting her lead. The halls felt longer this time, the shadows deeper. At one corner, I glanced up. One of the security cameras was turned, facing the wall. Not broken, just turned. At the diner, the air smelled of coffee and fried onions. The waitress barely looked up as we slid into a booth. Evelyn ordered 2 black coffees. My hands still shook as I wrapped them around the cup's warmth. She opened a small notebook and slid a photo across the table. Grainy surveillance, Daniel, older, bearded, stepping off a freight train. "Taken 6 months ago," she said, "before he disappeared again." "He's alive," I murmured. The world tilted. "Maybe not for long," she said. "If he left a trail this obvious, they're closing in. He must have wanted us to find him." "What's in the deposit box?" "Proof," she said. "But whatever's in there, it's dangerous. You can't go alone." "I've been alone for 30 years. "That's exactly why you shouldn't," she said, voice cracking. "I won't lose you like they lost him." Something about the way she said, "Lose you not, you'll die, but I'll lose you," hit a place in me I hadn't let anyone touch since Daniel vanished. I reached across the table and took her hand. Her fingers were cold but strong. "You're not losing me," I said. "We'll do it together." She nodded, eyes glinting with something between fear and determination. "Tomorrow morning, Harbor Federal opens at 9. I nodded too. "Then tomorrow we dig up the last grave." She smiled faintly at that, his smile, I realized, echoing in her face. When I got home near midnight, the house felt wrong again. The curtains I'd drawn were open a few inches. The stereo door was ajar, the tape missing. I froze in the doorway, keys biting my palm. A single note sat on the turntable, written in block letters with a pen that bled slightly through the page. "Stop looking. Some stories end for a reason." The handwriting wasn't Daniel's. It wasn't Ruth's. It was careful, impersonal, bureaucratic. Outside, a car door slammed and tires whispered against wet pavement. I stood in the middle of my living room, clutching the note, and for the first time since opening my own letter 30 years late, I realized whatever Daniel had buried, whoever they were still out there, and they knew I was reading again. I didn't sleep that night. I sat in the living room, the note from the turntable lying beside my cup of untouched tea. I kept rereading it, tracing the words with my finger. Stop looking. Some stories end for a reason. Whoever had written it hadn't broken in to steal. They had come only to deliver a warning or a threat. At 6 a.m., I packed a small bag. Inside, Daniel's first letter, Ruth's note, the locker key, the safe deposit key, and the photograph of Evelyn as a baby. Proof, pieces of a puzzle scattered through time. I slipped them all into an old leather purse, the same one I carried to Daniel's funeral. By 8:30, I was parked across from Harbor Federal Bank. The sky hung low and gray, promising rain. I watched the glass doors reflect the world like a secret people walking past, unaware of the storm beneath their feet. Evelyn arrived exactly at 9, hair damp from the mist, a navy coat hugging her small frame. She slid into the passenger seat, eyes flicking nervously toward the rearview mirror. "You weren't followed?" "I checked 3 times, I said. "You?" "Maybe," she murmured. A black SUV behind me for a few blocks. Then it turned off. Could be coincidence. We both knew coincidence had stopped existing the moment I pressed play. She took a deep breath. "Once we open that box, there's no putting anything back. I've spent 30 years in the dark," I said quietly. "Light hurts, but I'll take it." Inside, the bank was all marble and hush. The clerk, a middle-aged man with thinning hair, smiled politely when I handed him the key. "Box 19?" I said, my voice steady only because I forced it to be. He checked a ledger, nodded, and escorted us to the vault. The heavy steel door swung open on a sigh, the air inside cool and dry. Rows of boxes lined the walls, each one holding 1,000 private worlds. He pointed to ours, then discreetly stepped away. Evelyn and I exchanged a glance. She slid the key into the lock, turned it once, twice, and the latch gave. Inside was a single black envelope and a cassette tape identical to the first one. Across the front of the envelope, in Daniel's handwriting, were the words, "For Margaret, for Evelyn, together." My breath caught. I unfolded the flap and drew out a stack of papers, some typed, others handwritten. There were photographs, too, grainy shots of men in suits, factory lots, numbered containers, and something that looked like blueprints. "What is this?" Evelyn whispered, spreading them across the table. "Proof," I said, remembering Daniel's words. One document bore a government letterhead, "Project Mirador, decommissioned assets, 1,994. Names, signatures, shipment codes, all partially redacted. But one name wasn't Daniel Ellison, another Lila Hart, and then a third, Ruth Ellison. "Ruth was part of it," Evelyn said, reading over my shoulder. "She wasn't just protecting me. She was cleaning up after him." The cassette sat between us like a living thing. She picked it up, turning it over. "Do we listen now?" "Yes," I said. "We've come this far." There was a small listening room near the back of the vault, used for private reviews. The clerk let us in and shut the door behind us. Evelyn set the tape into the player built into the wall. My stomach twisted as I heard that faint click again, the sound of another ghost waking. Daniel's voice filled the room, quieter this time, almost fragile. If you've made it here, then they know. They always know. You've seen their signatures by now, Project Mirador. They said it was to test agricultural chemicals overseas, but it was never that simple. It was a cover for biological trials, something to bend truth, to rewrite memories. Lila was one of their scientists. I exposed the first report in '93. That's when they came for us? Evelyn covered her mouth. The papers on the table blurred before my eyes. Daniel continued, his tone heavy. Ruth helped me smuggle the files out. We used code names M, E, for you, Margaret Ellison, but also for memory extraction, the project's final phase. I didn't know until it was too late. They tested it on subjects who'd witnessed the trials. It wipes what they see, rewires what they believe. That's why you don't remember, Margaret. You were one of them. The world tilted. I gripped the table, nausea flooding me. Evelyn reached for me, voice shaking. Grandma, breathe. Daniel's voice went on. They came to the house in June '95. You were supposed to be taken in for debriefing. I couldn't let that happen. Lila helped me dose you first small amount, just enough to make you forget the night. We burned the papers, staged the accident, and I left before they could find the rest. You woke believing I was dead. I let you live inside that lie because it was safer than the truth. Tears blurred my vision. I remembered the night I thought he'd died, sirens, smoke, neighbors holding me back from the flames. I remembered faint images, hands, a shadow pulling me away from the window, a soft voice whispering, "You'll thank me for forgetting." It wasn't a dream. It was stolen memory. Evelyn hit pause. The silence pressed in. They erased you, she whispered. They made you forget him. And Ruth knew, I said bitterly. She always knew. Evelyn's face hardened. We have to get this out. The files, the tape. It's evidence. To who? I asked. If these people still exist, how do we even fight them? We start by telling the truth, she said. Even if no one listens. The door handle rattled. Both of us froze. Then the clerk's voice. Everything all right in there? Yes, Evelyn said quickly, pocketing the tape. We're just finishing up. He nodded, but his eyes lingered too long on the table as we left. My instincts screamed. The moment we stepped outside, I saw the black SUV idling across the street, engine running. Keep walking, Evelyn whispered. Don't look at them. We turned the corner. Hearts hammering. Where's your car? She asked. Around back, I said. We hurried down the alley, shoes splashing through puddles. When we reached the car, the passenger window was already smashed. The glove compartment hung open, papers scattered. They were here, Evelyn said. I looked inside. The envelope from the vault was gone, but the tape was still in her coat pocket. She met my eyes. Then we still have the truth. I wanted to believe that. I really did. But as we pulled away, I couldn't shake the image of that clerk's polite smile. or the faint red dot blinking under the rearview mirror. A tracker, maybe, or worse. They know, I whispered. Evelyn nodded grimly. Then let them watch. We're not running anymore. She turned up the radio to drown out the noise of the wind. I stared out the window at the gray sprawl of the city, feeling the years between us collapsing, folding in on themselves. For the first time since that letter surfaced, I felt not old but alive. Terrified, but alive. Daniel's voice echoed in my memory. Some funerals are for the living who buried what they shouldn't have. He was right. I had buried truth, buried myself, and now we were digging it up one shovel of memory at a time. As the rain began to fall, I whispered, "We're coming for you, Daniel, and this time I won't let you vanish." Evelyn's hand tightened on the wheel. Then we start where it ended. And through the windshield, as lightning split the sky, I saw it the silhouette of an old oak tree on the horizon, the same one I had dug under 30 years ago. The storm rolled in before noon, dragging its gray weight across the sky. Thunder rumbled in the distance, a low warning that seemed to follow us as we drove. The city shrank behind us, swallowed by rain, until all that was left was the narrow road curling toward the old house and the oak tree that had started everything. Evelyn drove in silence, her hands white on the steering wheel. Every so often, I caught her watching the rear-view mirror. The SUV was gone for now, but I could feel them behind us, somewhere, the way you feel a presence in an empty room. When we reached the house, the rain had slowed to a fine mist. The oak stood at the edge of the yard, its bare branches stretching like veins against the pale sky. The hole I'd dug weeks ago had filled halfway with water and mud. Beneath it, something still waited. Evelyn cut the engine. "You sure about this?" "I've never been sure of anything in my life," I said. "But this, yes." We stepped out. The wind tugged at our coats as we crossed the yard. The ground squelched underfoot. I grabbed the old shovel from the porch and handed her a flashlight. "If there's anything else buried here, we'll find it." She nodded, and together we began to dig. The first few inches came up easy, wet earth and tangled roots. Then the shovel struck something solid. Metal again. We knelt, scraping the dirt away until another small box appeared, identical to the first but newer, sealed with tape instead of a lock. Evelyn lifted it out. "This wasn't here 30 years ago." "No," I said quietly. He came back. We carried it inside, dripping mud onto the kitchen floor. I set it on the table, my heart pounding as we peeled the tape away. Inside was a waterproof pouch containing a flash drive, a letter, and a photograph. Recent, color, sharp. Daniel again. Older, gray-bearded, standing in front of a small cabin somewhere in the woods. The letter was addressed to both of us. "My girls," it began, "if you've found this, I'm gone for good this time. But not lost. I watched as long as I could. I stayed hidden near the coast, trading information to keep them away from you. But age catches everyone, and the truth has a way of demanding payment." Evelyn's lip trembled. "Keep reading," I said softly. "You've probably uncovered Project Mirador by now. What they were doing wasn't just erasing memories, they were rewriting them, testing how far they could bend truth before a mind broke. I was one of their subjects before I exposed them. So were you, Margaret." That's why the lines blur when you think about that summer. They made you forget not just the night I left, but the parts of me that refused to cooperate. I stared at the page, the words swimming. I had always remembered Daniel as kind, quiet, thoughtful, but there were blank spaces in my memory arguments I couldn't recall, nights that ended with tears I couldn't explain. Maybe those weren't just age. Maybe they were taken from me. The letter went on. Evelyn, if you're reading this, it means Ruth kept her promise. She raised you in the open, free from their reach. But freedom always has a cost. I left one last record proof, they continued Mirador overseas. The drive inside this box has everything. Don't bring it to the press. Don't upload it. Bring it to the place where I first met your mother, room 9, the seaside motel off Highway 41. There's someone there who still remembers me. Someone who can make this disappear safely. Evelyn turned the flash drive over in her hand. Do you believe him? I wanted to. God, I wanted to. But after 30 years of lies, the truth was no longer simple. We'll know soon enough, I said. We packed what we needed and left. The drive to the coast was 3 hours. Rain followed us most of the way, thinning only as we neared the ocean. The motel appeared just as the sun began to bleed through the clouds, faded blue paint, crooked neon sign, salt eating at the wood. Room 9's door was slightly open. Evelyn looked at me. Stay here. I'm coming. Inside, the air smelled of damp curtains and dust. On the table sat a small cassette player older than ours, and a handwritten note that simply read, Play me. Evelyn pressed the button. Daniel's voice filled the room one last time. Margaret. Evelyn. If you're here, then the world is still listening. That means they never stopped. I can't keep running. I've sent copies of the data to multiple places' insurance, but there's one truth they can't bury any more. He paused, as if steadying himself. Evelyn isn't just my daughter. She's yours too, Margaret. The room spun. The walls pulsed. No, I whispered. He continued. Lila was a carrier. They used her as a vessel to implant memories, to test how bloodlines react to rewritten pasts. Your DNA was part of their experiment. When I realized what they'd done, when I learned that Evelyn carried not just my genes, but yours, I knew we had to protect her. They wanted to erase her, to start again. So I gave her to Ruth. She was never supposed to find out. Evelyn's face drained of color. That's impossible. But deep down I felt it, the way her eyes mirrored mine, the way she had looked at me that first day as if something inside her recognized me before her mind did. Daniel's voice softened. If you're both hearing this, then forgive me. Love isn't always honest. Sometimes it hides because truth burns too bright. Take the drive, finish what I couldn't, end Mirador. And remember, memory is the only place we live twice. The tape clicked to silence. I couldn't speak. Evelyn turned to me slowly, tears streaking her cheeks. He lied to both of us. But he loved us too. How do you forgive something like that? I reached out, pulling her into my arms. By remembering anyway, I whispered. By choosing what to keep. We sat there for a long time, the storm outside finally breaking apart, leaving only the hush of waves beyond the window. When we rose, I took the flash drive and slipped it into my coat. "We'll take it to the authorities," I said. "Not to hide it this time, to end it." Evelyn nodded. "And if they come for us, then they'll find two women who remember everything." We left the motel together. The sun was setting a rare, fierce gold spilling over the ocean. I looked back once, just once, at the open door of room 9. For a moment, I thought I saw Daniel's silhouette in the window, tall, familiar, watching. Then it flickered and was gone. At the edge of the parking lot, Evelyn slipped her hand into mine. It was warm, alive, steady. "Do you think he ever really died?" she asked. I smiled faintly. Men like Daniel never die. They just turn into stories. We drove off, the road ahead glistening wet, the horizon wide open. Somewhere behind us, a door shut softly. Somewhere ahead, a new beginning waited.